The twisted metal gleamed under the harsh afternoon sun like a broken promise. Steam rising from what remained of the engine block in lazy spirals that reminded Maya Chen of incense at her grandmother's funeral. She stood barefoot on the hot asphalt, her work heels abandoned somewhere behind her, staring at the wreckage that had been her car just 30 minutes ago. The 1987 Honda Civic, scratched, dented, but faithfully hers for the past 8 years, now resembled abstract art more than transportation. I'm so sorry, Maya. I'm so sorry. Her sister Lily's voice cracked like ice over water, each word trembling with what Maya wanted to believe was genuine remorse. But something cold had settled in Maya's chest, a familiar weight that appeared whenever Lily's apologies came too quickly, too perfectly rehearsed. The brakes failed. I swear they just gave out when I was coming down Hillcrest Drive. I tried everything, the emergency brake, pumping them, everything. Maya's neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, emerged from her front door, her weathered hands clutching a dish towel, silver hair catching the light like spun moonbeams. Mija, I saw the whole thing, she called out, her accent thick with concern and something else. Something that made Maya's pulse quicken. That girl, she was going fast, real fast, like she was angry at the world. The police officer, a tall woman with kind eyes and a notebook that had seen better days, looked up from her accident report. Officer Sarah Martinez had been patrolling this neighborhood for 12 years, long enough to recognize the difference between an accident and something more deliberate. Ma'am, I need to ask, had your sister driven this vehicle before today? Hundreds of times. Maya heard herself saying, her voice sounding strange and distant. She's been borrowing it for months. She knows every gear, every quirk. The words hung in the air like accusations she wasn't ready to make. Not yet. Lily's tears fell in perfect, crystal drops that seemed to catch the light just right. At 24, she possessed the kind of ethereal beauty that made strangers stop on sidewalks, all delicate bones and wide eyes that promised innocence. Maya, 2 years older, had always been the practical one, the steady job, the careful savings, the responsible sister who never asked for help she couldn't repay. The car meant everything to her, Mrs. Rodriguez continued, stepping closer with the careful gait of someone who'd lived through enough drama to recognize its shape. Every morning at 7:15, she'd come out and pat the hood like it was a pet, even talk to it sometimes when she thought no one was watching. Maya felt heat creep up her neck. She did talk to the car, had named it Perseverance during her 3rd year of nursing school, when every day felt like climbing a mountain with stones in her shoes. The Honda had carried her through clinical rotations, double shifts at the hospital, and countless nights when she'd fallen asleep in the parking lot between jobs, too exhausted to drive the final 5 blocks home. I'll pay for everything, Lily whispered, reaching for Maya's arm with manicured fingers that had never known calluses. My insurance will cover it, and whatever they don't, I'll figure it out. I promise. You know I'm good for it. But Maya did know. She knew about the maxed out credit cards hidden in Lily's jewelry box, the unpaid student loans, the job at the art gallery that paid more in exposure than actual money. She knew about the designer clothes that appeared without explanation and the weekend trips to wine country that Lily somehow afforded on a part-time salary. The insurance adjuster arrived as the tow truck was loading the mangled Honda onto its flatbed. He was a small man with wire-rimmed glasses and the methodical air of someone who'd seen every possible way metal could be bent and twisted. James Hoffman, Pacific Mutual Insurance, he said, shaking Maya's hand with surprising firmness. I'll need some basic information about the vehicle, year, model, any modifications or special features.
Maya recited the details she'd memorized years ago. 1987 Honda Civic DX hatchback, manual transmission, original engine, about 180,000 miles. I bought it from an estate sale in Sacramento for $3,000. Mr. Hoffman made notes with the concentration of a monk transcribing scripture. And the previous owner? An elderly man named Thomas Blackwood. His daughter said he'd barely driven it, mostly just weekend trips to his cabin up in Tahoe. It was in remarkable condition for its age. Maya watched her car disappear around the corner, taking with it 8 years of memories and her primary means of getting to work tomorrow. Blackwood, you said? The adjuster looked up, pen poised above his notepad. Thomas Blackwood from Sacramento? Yes. Do you know the name? Something shifted in Mr. Hoffman's expression, a recognition that made him suddenly more alert. I'll need to do some research on the vehicle history. Sometimes these older cars have interesting backgrounds. I should have a preliminary assessment within 48 hours. Officer Martinez closed her notebook with a snap that sounded like a small thunderclap. Miss Chen, I have to ask, is there any reason your sister might have wanted to damage your vehicle? Any recent arguments, financial disputes, anything like that? The question hung between the three women like smoke. Maya felt Mrs. Rodriguez's eyes on her, expectant and knowing. Lily's face had gone pale, her tears momentarily forgotten. No, Maya said finally, though the word tasted like copper in her mouth. No reason at all. But even as she spoke, her mind was spinning backward through the past few weeks. The strange phone calls Lily had received late at night, speaking in hushed tones about handling it and making sure she understands. The way Lily had insisted on borrowing the car today specifically, even though Maya had mentioned needing it for grocery shopping today. The look in her sister's eyes this morning, not guilt or nervousness, but something harder, something that looked almost like determination. As the sun began to set, painting the accident scene in shades of amber and gold, Maya found herself remembering her grandmother's words from years ago. Some people break things when they can't fix themselves, mija. The question is whether they mean to hurt you or just don't care if they do. The street slowly emptied as neighbors returned to their dinners and evening routines. Officer Martinez departed with promises to file her report promptly. Mr. Hoffman disappeared into his sedan with Maya's phone number and a promise to call soon. Only Mrs. Rodriguez remained, standing like a sentinel in her doorway, watching over Maya with the fierce protectiveness of someone who'd chosen her as family. Come inside, the older woman offered. I made too much pozole again, and you look like you haven't eaten today. Maya realized she was starving, had skipped lunch in her hurry to finish inventory at the hospital before meeting Lily. But something about the wreckage, about the perfect way Lily's story had emerged fully formed, made her stomach clench with unease. In a minute, I just need to think. Mrs. Rodriguez nodded with the understanding of someone who'd done her share of difficult thinking. That car, your grandmother would have been proud. You took something broken and made it run for 8 years through pure stubbornness and love. That's not nothing, mija. That's everything. As darkness fell over the neighborhood, Maya stood alone in the spot where her car had died, breathing in the lingering smell of coolant and wondering why her sister's tears had stopped the moment she thought no one was watching. Tomorrow would bring phone calls to work, arrangements for temporary transportation, and the beginning of what she suspected would be a very long conversation with her insurance company. But tonight, in the growing shadows of Hillcrest Drive, Maya Chen was beginning to suspect that her sister had just destroyed far more than an old Honda Civic. She was beginning to suspect that everything she thought she knew about her family was about to change forever. The first stars were appearing overhead when her phone buzzed with a text from Lily. Staying at Derek's tonight. Needs space to process what happened. Love you. Maya stared at the message for a long time, noting how quickly grief had transformed into the need for space, how readily her sister had found somewhere else to sleep. She thought about Thomas Blackwood, the mysterious previous owner, and the way the insurance adjuster's demeanor had shifted when she mentioned his name. Most of all, she thought about Mrs. Rodriguez's words. That girl was going fast, like she was angry at the world, or angry at her sister.
Maya's alarm clock screamed at 5:30 a.m., just as it had every weekday for the past 4 years. She rolled over in bed, muscle memory reaching for the familiar weight of her car keys on the nightstand before reality crashed back like cold water. No car, no easy 20-minute drive to Riverside Community Hospital, no quiet morning ritual of warming up perseverance while drinking coffee from her travel mug that read, "World's Okayest Nurse." Instead, she found herself standing at the bus stop at 6:15 a.m., surrounded by the kind of people who rode public transportation out of necessity rather than choice. The morning air carried the scent of diesel exhaust and yesterday's rain, mixing with the distant aroma of fresh bread from the Vietnamese bakery 2 blocks away. A young mother bounced a fussy infant while juggling a diaper bag and a stack of job applications. An elderly man in a maintenance uniform dozed against the shelter wall, his calloused hands folded over a lunchbox that had seen better decades. Maya felt a familiar tightness in her chest, the same sensation that had plagued her since childhood whenever she felt exposed, vulnerable, different from the people around her. Growing up, their mother had worked 3 jobs to keep them in the suburban school district, driving an ancient Buick that broke down monthly, but somehow always started again. Maya had learned early that transportation was freedom, that having your own wheels meant never having to depend on anyone else's schedule or goodwill. The bus wheezed to a stop, its doors opening with a mechanical sigh that sounded almost human. Maya climbed aboard, fishing exact change from her purse while trying to ignore the way her scrubs already felt wrinkled from the morning humidity. She found a seat near the middle, next to a window that was either dirty or fogged, impossible to tell which. As the bus lurched into motion, Maya pulled out her phone and scrolled through her messages. Nothing from Lily, which wasn't unusual. Her sister rarely emerged before noon on the best of days. But there were 3 missed calls from a number she didn't recognize, all received after midnight, no voicemails, just the electronic equivalent of someone knocking on her door and running away. Rough night? The voice belonged to Marcus Thompson, a respiratory therapist who worked the morning shift at Riverside. He was a large man with gentle eyes and a laugh that could fill an entire break room, the kind of person patients requested specifically because his presence made everything seem less frightening. Car trouble? Maya said, which was technically true, if dramatically understated. How long is this ride supposed to take? About 45 minutes with good traffic. Hour and change if we hit construction. Marcus studied her face with the practiced eye of someone who spent his days reading people's breathing patterns, heart rates, and unspoken fears. Want to talk about it? You look like someone who hasn't slept in a week.
Maya considered the questions seriously. Marcus was one of the few people at work who felt like a genuine friend rather than just a professional acquaintance. They'd shared countless breaks in the hospital's tiny staff kitchen, swapping stories about difficult patients, impossible schedules, and the peculiar blend of heartbreak and hope that came with healthcare work. "My sister crashed my car yesterday," she said finally. "Claimed the brakes failed, but..." She trailed off, realizing she didn't know how to finish that sentence without sounding paranoid or cruel. "But you don't believe her?" The directness of the question caught Maya off guard. She'd spent years perfecting the art of diplomatic family discussions, carefully avoiding topics that might trigger Lily's dramatic reactions or their mother's anxious peacemaking. "I don't know what I believe anymore." Marcus nodded slowly. "Family's complicated. My brother borrowed my truck last year, said he needed it for moving furniture. Brought it back 3 days later with a cracked windshield and cigarette burns on the seats. Never did tell me what really happened, but I could smell perfume that definitely wasn't his girlfriend's." The bus hit a pothole that seemed designed specifically to test the limits of municipal suspension systems. Maya gripped the seat in front of her, wondering if this was how the rest of her life would feel. Unexpected jolts in routine moments, the constant awareness that stability was more fragile than she'd imagined. "The thing is," Maya continued, surprising herself with the words, "Lily's always been dramatic.
Even when we were kids, she'd turn paper cuts into medical emergencies, failed tests into persecution complexes. Our mom used to say she had an artist temperament, like that explained everything. And you? I was the responsible one. The one who made sure bills got paid and dentist appointments got kept. The one who never asked for anything because I was too busy making sure everyone else was okay. I realized how bitter I sounded and tried to soften my tone. I mean, I chose that role. Nobody forced me. Marcus was quiet for a couple of blocks, watching the city wake up outside the bus windows. Coffee shops were turning on their neon signs, joggers were claiming the sidewalks, and the early commuters were beginning their daily pilgrimage to offices and factories and hospitals. "You know what I think?" he said eventually. "I think sometimes people mistake being needed for being loved. And sometimes the people who need us the most are the ones who hurt us the worst because they know we'll stick around anyway." The observation hit Maya like a physical weight. She thought about all the time she'd covered for Lily, the rent money she'd lent that never got repaid, the late-night calls from parties or bars when Lily needed a ride home, the careful conversations with her mother about why Lily was taking a break from college or exploring her options with employment. Her phone buzzed with a text from her supervisor. "Heard about your car. Take whatever time you need today. Sarah can cover your morning rounds." The kindness in the message made Maya's eyes water unexpectedly. She'd been working at Riverside for 6 years, building relationships with patients and colleagues through small acts of competence and care. Yesterday, she'd been Maya, the reliable nurse with the gentle hands and the patient ear. Today, she was Maya, the woman who rode the bus because her sister had destroyed her car, for reasons that still made no sense. By the time they reached the hospital, the morning rush was in full swing. Maya thanked Marcus and stepped off the bus, immediately missing the enclosed warmth of public transportation. The parking lot stretched before her like a concrete ocean, filled with vehicles she couldn't afford, new SUVs and pristine sedans belonging to doctors and administrators who'd never worried about brake repair costs or the humiliation of asking family members for rides. Inside the hospital, Maya went through her morning routine with mechanical precision. She checked patient charts, distributed medications, and answered call lights with the same cheerful professionalism that had earned her 3 Employee of the Month awards and countless thank you cards from grateful families. But underneath her professional exterior, her mind kept returning to yesterday's accident scene. She remembered the way Lily had positioned herself during the conversation with the police officer, slightly angled away from Maya, as if creating physical distance from the consequences of her story. She remembered the insurance adjuster's reaction to Thomas Blackwood's name, the subtle shift from routine assessment to active investigation. Most of all, she remembered Mrs. Rodriguez's words about Lily driving fast, like she was angry at the world. During her lunch break, Maya sat in the hospital cafeteria with her phone and a wilted salad, scrolling through her contact list. She wanted to call Lily to demand explanations and apologies and some kind of plan for moving forward. But something stopped her, the same instinct that had kept her from pushing too hard when Lily's stories didn't quite add up, when money disappeared from her purse or her sister's eyes held secrets she wasn't ready to share. Instead, Maya found herself calling the insurance adjuster. "Mr. Hoffman, this is Maya Chen. You assessed my car yesterday after the accident. I was wondering if you'd learned anything about the vehicle history you mentioned." There was a pause, the sound of paper shuffling. "Miss Chen, I'm glad you called. I've been trying to reach you. Are you somewhere private where we can talk?" The question sent a chill down Maya's spine. "I'm at work, but I can find somewhere quiet. Is everything okay?" "It's complicated. The vehicle you purchased from the Blackwood estate, we need to discuss its provenance. And Miss Chen, you might want to sit down for this conversation." Maya left her untouched salad on the cafeteria table and walked toward the hospital's quiet prayer room, her heart pounding with the rhythm of approaching revelation. Whatever Mr. Hoffman was about to tell her, she sensed it would change everything she thought she knew about her car,
her sister, and the accident that had brought them all together in ways she was only beginning to understand. Behind her, through the cafeteria's large windows, she could see the bus she'd ridden that morning making its return journey, carrying other people toward their own unexpected destinations. Tomorrow she would need to ride it again, but something told her that by then, everything else about her life might be completely different. The prayer room was empty, filled with the kind of profound silence that existed only in spaces dedicated to reflection and desperate hope. Maya closed the door behind her and pressed Mr. Hoffman's number, preparing to learn whatever truth had been waiting in the wreckage of her ordinary Honda Civic.
That's exactly what made it so remarkable. Most prototype vehicles are destroyed after testing or end up in museums. This one somehow made its way into private hands and was driven as a daily vehicle for over 30 years. According to Honda's records, it was supposed to have been returned to the company in 1989, but it never arrived. It's been considered missing ever since. Maya sank into one of the prayer room's simple wooden chairs, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. How much? I mean, what would something like that be worth? The pause that followed seemed to stretch for hours. Based on recent sales of similar prototype vehicles from major manufacturers, and considering the exceptional condition you described, the estimated value would be somewhere between $700,000 and $1.2 million. The number hit Maya like a physical blow. $800,000. Her $3,000 Honda Civic that she'd driven to work every day, that she'd eaten lunch in during break, that she'd slept in when she was too tired to drive home, it had been worth more than she would earn in 15 years of nursing. "Miss Chen, are you still there?" "I'm here." Her voice sounded strange, distant. How is this possible? How did Thomas Blackwood end up with a prototype Honda?" That's where things get interesting. I managed to reach Mr. Blackwood's daughter, Patricia. She told me her father worked as an engineer for Honda's American testing facility in the 1980s. Apparently, he was part of the team that developed the SI prototype. When the project was canceled, he asked permission to purchase one of the test vehicles. Honda agreed, but there seems to have been some miscommunication about returning it later for historical archiving. Maya's mind reeled with implications. For 8 years, she'd been driving automotive history to her job at a community hospital, parking it between rusted pickup trucks and economy cars held together with hope and duct tape. She'd changed its oil at quick lube stations and filled its tank at discount gas stations, never knowing she was caring for something museums would kill to display. "There's something else," Mr. Hoffman continued. "Given the value and rarity, this accident is going to trigger a comprehensive investigation. The police will need to re-examine the incident, and my company will be conducting its own assessment of the damage claim. A loss of this magnitude requires multiple levels of approval and verification." What does that mean for me? It means everyone involved in yesterday's accident will be questioned extensively. The cause of the crash will be examined in much greater detail. If there is any indication that this was intentional damage rather than an accident, he left the sentence hanging, but Maya understood the implication. After ending the call, Maya sat in the prayer room for 20 minutes, staring at the simple wooden cross on the wall and trying to process the magnitude of what she'd just learned. $800,000. The amount represented more money than her family had ever discussed in concrete terms. Enough to pay off her student loans, buy a house, ensure her mother never worried about retirement. And Lily had destroyed it. The thought hit Maya with crystalline clarity. Whether the brakes had truly failed or not, her sister had taken something irreplaceable and turned it into twisted metal and shattered glass. The car that had carried Maya through nursing school, through exhausting double shifts, through the darkest period after their father's death, it hadn't just been transportation.
It had been a piece of automotive history, and now it was gone. Maya's phone buzzed with another text from the unknown number. "We need to talk. Tonight. This affects more than just you."
This time, instead of ignoring the message, Maya responded, "Who is this?" The reply came immediately. "Someone who knows what your sister really did to that car. And why." Maya stared at the message until the screen went dark, her reflection appearing ghost-like in the black surface. The prayer room felt smaller suddenly, as if the walls were closing in with the weight of secrets and implications she didn't yet understand. She returned to work in a daze, going through the motions of patient care while her mind spun with questions and possibilities. During afternoon rounds, she found herself in room 314 with Mrs. Eleanor Vasquez, a 78-year-old woman recovering from hip replacement surgery. Mrs. Vasquez had been a patient for 5 days, and Maya had grown fond of her sharp wit and unexpected observations about hospital life. "You look like someone who's seen a ghost, mija," Mrs. Vasquez said as Maya checked her IV line. "Bad news from home?" Maya considered deflecting the question with professional pleasantries, but something about Mrs. Vasquez's knowing eyes invited honesty. "Family drama. My sister borrowed my car and crashed it yesterday. Turns out the car was worth a lot more money than I thought." "How much more money?" "Enough to change everything." Mrs. Vasquez nodded slowly, her weathered hands folding over the hospital blanket. "I had a sister like that once. Beautiful girl, charming as sunshine, but she had a talent for breaking things that belonged to other people. My grandmother's china set, my wedding dress, my husband's trust in our family." She paused, studying Maya's face. "The question isn't whether she meant to hurt you, mija. The question is what you're going to do about it now that you know what you've lost." The conversation stayed with Maya through the rest of her shift. As evening approached, she found herself dreading the journey home. Not just the bus ride, but the prospect of facing Lily and pretending everything was normal when nothing would ever be normal again. At 7:30 p.m., Maya stood outside the hospital's main entrance, waiting for the bus that would carry her back to a life that no longer made sense. The parking lot was emptying as the day shift ended, leaving behind the scattered vehicles of night staff and patients' families keeping bedside vigils. Her phone rang. Lily's name appeared on the screen, accompanied by a photo from last Christmas when they'd both been laughing at something their mother had said during dinner preparation. "Maya? Thank God you answered. I've been trying to call you all day." "I was working." Maya kept her voice neutral, though her heart was pounding. "How are you feeling after yesterday?" "Terrible! I barely slept last night. I keep seeing the accident in my head, wondering if there was something I could have done differently. The insurance adjuster called me today. He had some interesting information about the car." There was a pause. Barely perceptible, but long enough for Maya to notice. "Oh, what kind of information?" "Apparently it was worth significantly more than I thought. Much more." Another pause, longer this time. "How much more?"
Maya waited, letting the silence stretch between them. This was the moment, the opportunity for Lily to react with appropriate shock, to ask follow-up questions, to express horror at the magnitude of what had been lost. Instead, the silence continued until it became uncomfortable, then suspicious. "Lily, are you still there?" "Yes, I'm here. How much are we talking about?" The question itself was wrong. Not, "What do you mean it was worth more?" or "How is that possible?" but "How much are we talking about?" As if Lily already knew there was more to the story. "About $800,000, Maya said, watching her words like stones thrown into still water, waiting to see what kind of ripples they would create. The sharp intake of breath that followed sounded genuine, but Maya found herself analyzing even that response, questioning whether her sister's surprise was real or performed. $800,000? Maya, that's impossible. It was just an old Honda. Apparently, it only 50 ever made. Jesus Christ! Lily's voice had dropped to a whisper. Maya, I'm so sorry. If I had known. But you didn't know, right? You had no idea the car was valuable when you borrowed it yesterday.
Of course I didn't know. How could I have known something like that? The denial came too quickly, too forcefully. Maya felt a familiar sinking sensation, the same feeling she'd experienced years ago when she'd found money missing from her purse, and Lily had sworn she'd never seen it. Where are you right now? I'm at Derek's apartment. Why? Because I think we need to talk in person, tonight. Maya, I can't. I'm not ready to see you yet. I feel too guilty about what happened. Another perfect response, the kind of thing someone would say if they were genuinely traumatized by accidentally destroying their sister's car. But something about the phrasing felt rehearsed, as if Lily had spent the day preparing for this exact conversation. The bus arrived with its familiar mechanical wheeze, and Maya climbed aboard without ending the call. The same elderly man in the maintenance uniform was there, along with a new collection of evening commuters, heading home from jobs that barely paid enough to cover bus fare. Lily, I need to ask you something directly, and I need you to tell me the truth. Of course, anything. Did you crash my car on purpose? The silence that followed was different from the earlier pauses. Deeper, more complete, like the moment before a storm breaks. Maya, how can you even ask me that? I'm your sister. I would never. That's not an answer. No, I did not crash your car on purpose. It was an accident. A horrible, terrible accident, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. Maya closed her eyes, listening to the words and the space between them, trying to hear truth or deception in her sister's voice. The problem was that she'd been listening to Lily's explanations for so many years that she no longer trusted her own ability to distinguish between honesty and performance.
I have to go, she said finally. We'll talk tomorrow. Maya, wait! But Maya had already ended the call, leaving her sister's voice hanging in the digital void between them. As the bus carried her through the evening traffic toward home, Maya realized that tomorrow's conversation wouldn't just be about the car or the money or even the accident itself. Tomorrow, she would have to decide whether she still had a sister she could trust or whether Lily had destroyed that too. The unknown number called again at 11:47 p.m., just as Maya was finally drifting toward sleep. This time she answered on the second ring. Maya Chen? The voice was female, older, with the careful diction of someone accustomed to difficult conversations. Who is this? How did you get my number? My name is Patricia Blackwood. I'm Thomas Blackwood's daughter, the man who sold you the Honda. There was a rustling of papers in the background, the sound of someone settling in for a long conversation. Mr. Hoffman from the insurance company gave me your contact information. I hope that's all right. Maya sat up in bed, suddenly fully awake. Mrs. Blackwood, I'm so sorry for your loss, and I'm grateful that your father took such good care of the car. I had no idea it was so special when I bought it. That's exactly what I wanted to discuss with you. Maya, may I call you Maya? There are some things about the car's history that I think you need to know, especially given the circumstances of the accident. Something in Patricia Blackwood's tone sent a chill through Maya's chest. What do you mean? 3 weeks ago, I received a phone call from a young woman who claimed to be researching classic Honda vehicles for a college project. She asked very specific questions about the car: when my father had acquired it, whether I knew about its prototype status, whether there were any documentation or certificates that came with it. Maya's grip on the phone tightened. What did she look like, this researcher? We never met in person. She called herself Lisa Chen, said she was a student at UC Davis studying automotive history. She seemed very knowledgeable about the Honda SI development program, knew details about the testing process that weren't common knowledge. She asked if I knew who had purchased the car from the estate sale, whether they were aware of its value. The room seemed to grow colder around Maya. Did you tell her? I told her I sold it to a young nurse named Maya Chen, who had seemed delighted with the car's condition and reliability. I mentioned that you'd mentioned planning to drive it for many years, that you'd treated it like it was precious, even when you thought it was just an ordinary Honda. Maya's mind reeled with the implications. Lisa Chen. Close enough to Maya Chen to be believable, different enough to maintain distance. Lily had researched the car, had known about its value, and then called the previous owner's family to gather information. Mrs. Blackwood, did this Lisa Chen ask anything else? Anything specifically about me?
She wanted to know if you lived alone, whether you had family, what your work schedule was like. At the time, I thought she was just being thorough with her research project. But after Mr. Hoffman called me about the accident, Patricia's voice trailed off meaningfully. I felt sick. She was planning this. The crash wasn't an accident. There's more. After our phone conversation, Lisa Chen sent me an email thanking me for my help. But she made a mistake. She sent it from an email address that said lily.chenartist@gmail. When I tried to respond with some additional information about my father's time at Honda, the email bounced back. The account had been deleted. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, and devastating. Lily had researched the car's history, learned about its extraordinary value, and then deliberately crashed it. But why? What possible motive could justify destroying something worth $800,000? Maya's phone buzzed with an incoming text from Lily. Can't sleep. Keep thinking about the accident. We need to talk soon. There are things I need to tell you. The timing felt like a twisted coincidence. Or perhaps Lily's guilt had finally become too heavy to carry. Mrs. Blackwood, thank you for calling me. This information, it changes everything. Maya, I'm sorry to be the bearer of such difficult news, but I felt you deserved to know the truth about what happened to my father's car. He would have been heartbroken to know it was destroyed deliberately. After ending the call, Maya stared at the ceiling for hours, her mind spinning with questions and implications. She thought about all the times Lily had borrowed the car over the past months, claiming she needed it for gallery events or dates or simple errands. Had she been planning this destruction all along? Had she been waiting for the right moment to stage an accident that would look convincing to insurance investigators and police? By morning, Maya had reached a decision. She would confront Lily directly, armed with Patricia Blackwood's information and her own growing certainty that the accident had been deliberate. But first, she needed to understand the full scope of what her sister had done. At 7 a.m., Maya called Officer Martinez. Officer Martinez, this is Maya Chen. You took the accident report yesterday when my sister crashed my car. I have some new information that I think you need to hear. I'm listening, Miss Chen. Maya explained about the insurance adjuster's discovery, about the car's extraordinary value, about Patricia Blackwood's phone call, and the mysterious research inquiry from Lisa Chen. With each detail, she could hear Officer Martinez's interest sharpening. Ms. Chen, what you're describing sounds like premeditated insurance fraud, possibly rising to the level of felony destruction of property. Given the value involved, we're talking about serious criminal charges. Officer Martinez's voice had taken on the professional gravity of someone shifting from routine traffic accident to major criminal investigation. I need you to come to the station this morning to make a formal statement. And Miss Chen, don't contact your sister until after you've spoken with us. Maya arrived at the police station at 9 a.m., her hands shaking as she pushed through the heavy glass doors. The lobby smelled like industrial coffee and disinfectant, with fluorescent lighting that made everyone look vaguely unwell. Officer Martinez met her at the front desk, accompanied by Detective James Rodriguez, a soft-spoken man with tired eyes who introduced himself as the department's financial crimes specialist. We've already begun reviewing the physical evidence from the accident scene, Detective Rodriguez explained as he led Maya to a small interview room. Given what you've told us about the vehicle's value and your sister's apparent prior knowledge, we're treating this as a potential criminal matter. Maya found herself in the strange position of providing evidence against her own sister, answering detailed questions about Lily's recent behavior, financial situation, and access to the car. Each question felt like a small betrayal, but the weight of Patricia Blackwood's revelations made denial impossible. Has your sister ever asked you about the car's history or value? Detective Rodriguez asked, his pen poised over a legal pad. Not directly, but she always seemed interested in it, where I'd bought it, how much I'd paid, whether I'd ever considered selling it. Maya paused, remembering conversations she'd dismissed as casual curiosity.
A few months ago, she suggested I should get it appraised for insurance purposes. She said old cars sometimes turned out to be worth more than people expected.
Officer Martinez exchanged a meaningful look with the detective. Miss Chen, we're going to need to examine your sister's phone records, email accounts, and any other digital communications that might contain evidence of premeditation. Are you prepared for the possibility that this investigation could result in serious criminal charges against her? The question hung in the air like smoke. Maya thought about Lily at age 7, crying over a broken doll and promising she'd never break anything again. She thought about teenage Lily, practicing drama monologues in their shared bedroom, her voice carrying the passion of someone who believed deeply in the power of performance. She thought about adult Lily, beautiful and charming and perpetually in need of rescue from situations that were never quite her fault. I need to understand why, Maya said finally. If she knew the car was valuable, why destroy it? What did she gain from the accident? Detective Rodriguez leaned back in his chair, studying Maya with the careful attention of someone accustomed to reading human motivation. In cases like this, the motive is usually financial. Insurance fraud, attempting to claim money for damage to a vehicle the perpetrator believes belongs to them, or creating a crisis that requires family financial intervention. But the car belonged to me. My name was on the title. My name was on the insurance policy. That doesn't always matter to someone who feels entitled to family assets, Officer Martinez added gently. We see situations where siblings, spouses, or children believe they have a right to property that legally belongs to someone else. Maya's phone buzzed with another text from Lily. Maya, please call me. I can't handle this guilt anymore. There are things I need to confess. Detective Rodriguez noticed Maya's reaction to the message. Ms. Chen, would you be willing to participate in a controlled phone conversation with your sister? With your consent, we could record the call and use anything she says as evidence. The request felt like stepping off a cliff. Once Maya agreed to help law enforcement build a case against Lily, there would be no going back to the complicated but familiar dynamics of their family relationship. But the alternative, pretending the accident was genuine, allowing Lily to escape consequences for destroying something irreplaceable, felt like a betrayal of truth itself. Yes, Maya heard herself saying, I'll do it. The controlled phone call took place that afternoon in the police station's conference room, with Maya seated at a large table surrounded by recording equipment and 2 detectives. Her hands trembled as she dialed Lily's number, and for a moment she hoped her sister wouldn't answer, that they could postpone this moment of reckoning indefinitely. Maya, thank God, I've been going crazy waiting to hear from you. Lily's voice sounded strained, exhausted, nothing like the polished performance from their previous conversation. I got your messages. You said you needed to confess something? There was a long pause, the sound of Lily taking a shaky breath. Maya, I need to tell you the truth about the accident. I know I said the brakes failed, but that's not what really happened. Maya's heart pounded so loudly she was sure it would be audible on the recording. What really happened, Lily? I was angry, furious, actually, at you, at my life, at everything. Derek and I had a huge fight that morning, and my credit card got declined at the coffee shop, and I was supposed to have money from the gallery, but they said the check wouldn't be ready until next week. Lily's voice was gaining speed, words tumbling over each other in a rush of confession. I was driving your car and thinking about how you always have everything together, your job, your savings, your perfect little Honda that never breaks down, and I just snapped. Maya closed her eyes, forcing herself to remain silent and let Lily continue. I saw the concrete barrier, and I thought, just for a second, what would happen if something happened to the car? You'd have to file an insurance claim, you'd get money for a replacement, maybe something would finally go wrong in your perfect, responsible life. Lily was crying now.
Her words distorted by tears and guilt. I didn't mean for it to be so bad. I thought maybe a fender bender or something minor. But the car hit harder than I expected. And by the time I realized how badly it was damaged, I couldn't take it back. Detective Rodriguez was writing rapidly, his expression carefully neutral. Officer Martinez sat perfectly still, allowing the confession to unfold without interruption. "Lily," Maya said carefully, "did you know the car was valuable when you decided to crash it?" Another pause, longer this time. "I had suspicions. I'd been doing some research about old Hondas, and I found some information about prototype models from the 1980s. I called the previous owner's daughter to ask some questions." "You called Patricia Blackwood?" "Yes. She's told me about her father's work at Honda, about the prototype program. I knew there was a chance your car might be worth more than you thought, but I never imagined it was worth hundreds of thousands of dollars." Lily's voice rose to a near wail. "Maya, I'm so sorry. If I had known how much money we're talking about, I never would have done it. Never." Maya felt a complex mixture of vindication and heartbreak. The confession confirmed her worst suspicions, but it also revealed the petty, impulsive nature of Lily's motivations. Her sister hadn't been executing some sophisticated fraud scheme. She'd been having a tantrum, lashing out at Maya's stability and success in the most destructive way possible. "What happens now?" Lily asked, her voice small and frightened. Maya looked at Detective Rodriguez, who nodded encouragingly. "Now you need to tell the police the truth, all of it, and then we figure out how to move forward." "The police? Maya, you didn't call the police, did you?" The shift in Lily's tone was immediate and dramatic, from confession to accusation, from guilt to anger. It was so familiar that Maya almost smiled, despite the gravity of the situation. "Yes, Lily, I called the police. You destroyed something worth $800,000 and lied about it. What did you think would happen?" "I thought my sister would forgive me. I thought you'd understand that I made a mistake, that I was hurting and I did something stupid." Lily's voice was rising, taking on the particular quality of performance that Maya had learned to recognize. "I never thought you'd turn me in to the cops like I'm some kind of criminal." "You are a criminal, Lily. What you did is called insurance fraud, and it's a felony." The line went quiet for a long moment. When Lily spoke again, her voice had changed completely. Cold, calculating, nothing like the tearful confession of moments earlier. "You know what, Maya? You want to play it this way? Fine. Good luck proving any of this. I'll say you pressured me into confessing, that you manipulated me when I was emotionally vulnerable. I'll say the accident really was mechanical failure and the research I did was just casual curiosity. It's your word against mine, and I'm a much better actress than you are." The transformation was so complete, so chilling, that Maya felt like she was talking to a stranger. This wasn't the impulsive, guilty sister who had confessed moments earlier. This was someone calculating the angles, looking for ways to escape consequences. "Lily!" But the line had gone dead. Lily had hung up, leaving Maya staring at her phone in the police station conference room, surrounded by detectives who had just witnessed her sister's complete confession, followed by her immediate retraction and threat. Detective Rodriguez turned off the recording equipment with a satisfied click. "Miss Chen, what we just heard constitutes a full confession to multiple felonies, followed by witness intimidation. Your sister's attempt to recant her confession actually strengthens our case. It shows consciousness of guilt and an intent to obstruct justice." Maya nodded numbly, though part of her wished the confession had never happened. For a few minutes, she'd glimpsed the sister she remembered from childhood, impulsive, emotional, capable of remorse. But that person had vanished as soon as consequences appeared, replaced by someone willing to manipulate and threaten to avoid accountability. "What happens next?" Maya asked. "We obtain a warrant for your sister's arrest," Officer Martinez replied. "Based on her confession and the supporting evidence, we'll charge her with felony insurance fraud, destruction of property, and potentially additional charges depending on what we find in her digital communications." Maya left the police station feeling hollowed out, as if something essential had been carved away from her center. She'd spent the morning helping law enforcement build a case against her own sister.
And while she believed it was the right thing to do, it felt like another kind of ending. The evening news would later report the arrest of Lily Chen, 24, on charges of insurance fraud and felony destruction of property related to the deliberate destruction of a rare Honda prototype valued at over $800,000. But for Maya, the headlines would never capture the real story, the decades of enabling and excusing, the gradual erosion of trust, the moment when love had to be weighed against justice and found wanting. As she waited for the bus that would carry her home to a life forever changed, Maya realized that some crashes destroyed more than just cars. Some crashes destroyed the careful illusions that families built to avoid seeing each other clearly. And sometimes those crashes were exactly what someone intended all along. The courtroom smelled like polished wood and nervous sweat, with afternoon sunlight streaming through tall windows that cast everything in golden uncertainty. Maya sat in the front row behind the prosecutor's table, wearing her best navy dress and the pearl earrings their grandmother had left her, the same earrings Lily had borrowed last Christmas and forgotten to return. 3 months had passed since the controlled phone call that captured Lily's confession. 3 months of depositions and evidence gathering, of sleepless nights and conversations with lawyers who spoke in careful legal phrases that made Maya's destroyed car sound like an abstract concept rather than 8 years of memories twisted into scrap metal. District Attorney Jennifer Walsh was younger than Maya had expected, with precise auburn hair and the kind of focused intensity that suggested she took financial crimes personally. Miss Chen, your sister's case represents something larger than insurance fraud. It's about the deliberate destruction of irreplaceable cultural artifacts, about the erosion of trust within families, about the assumption that forgiveness can be weaponized to avoid consequences. Now, watching Lily enter the courtroom in a conservative gray suit that made her look younger and more vulnerable, Maya felt the familiar tug of protectiveness that had shaped their relationship for decades. Her sister's attorney, Richard Hawthorne, was exactly the kind of expensive defense lawyer their mother had somehow managed to afford, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, and with the confidence of someone accustomed to turning criminal defendants into sympathetic figures.
Your Honor, Hawthorne began during his opening statement, this case is about a young woman who made a terrible mistake during a moment of emotional crisis. My client, Lily Chen, suffers from anxiety and depression that sometimes manifest in impulsive behaviors she later deeply regrets. The destruction of her sister's vehicle was not a calculated fraud scheme. It was the desperate act of someone struggling with mental health issues and financial pressure. Maya watched the jury's faces as Hawthorne spoke, noting which jurors seemed responsive to the narrative of Lily as victim rather than perpetrator. A middle-aged woman in the front row was nodding slightly, her expression sympathetic. An older man looked skeptical, but not unsympathetic. Maya realized she was holding her breath. When D.A. Walsh stood to present the prosecution's case, her tone was measured but uncompromising. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, mental health struggles do not excuse the deliberate destruction of property worth $800,000. The evidence will show that Lily Chen researched her sister's vehicle, learned about its extraordinary value, and then made a calculated decision to stage an accident for personal gain. The evidence was overwhelming and methodical. Patricia Blackwood testified about the phone call from Lisa Chen, describing the specific questions about the car's history and value. Phone records showed multiple calls between Lily and the Blackwood family. Email forensics revealed the deleted Gmail account that had connected Lily to her false identity. Maya's own testimony felt like an out-of-body experience. She recounted years of small betrayals and excuses, times when money had gone missing or stories hadn't quite added up. She described the morning of the accident, the way Lily had insisted on borrowing the car despite Maya's plans to use it. Most painfully,
She played the recorded confession for the jury, her sister's voice filling the courtroom with admissions of anger, resentment, and deliberate destruction. "Miss Chen," Hawthorne said during cross-examination, his voice gentle but probing, "you've described a pattern of what you characterize as your sister's dishonesty over many years. Why didn't you refuse to lend her the car if you had such concerns about her behavior?" The question cut to the heart of Maya's own complicity, her years of enabling disguised as family loyalty. "Because I loved her," Maya said simply. "Because I wanted to believe she was getting better, that each incident was the last one. Because sometimes love makes you ignore red flags that seem obvious in retrospect." And isn't it possible that your sister's confession was the product of guilt and emotional manipulation rather than actual criminal intent? Isn't it possible she was telling you what you thought you wanted to hear? Maya considered the question seriously, remembering the cold calculation in Lily's voice when she'd threatened to recant her confession. "No," she said finally. "The confession was the most honest conversation we'd had in years. Everything that came after, the threats, the attempts to manipulate the situation, that was more typical of who my sister had become." Dr. Amanda Foster, a forensic psychologist who had evaluated Lily, testified that while her patient showed signs of anxiety and depression, she demonstrated clear understanding of right and wrong and the ability to plan complex deceptions. "Miss Chen's behavior shows premeditation, not impulsivity," Dr. Foster explained. "The research phase, the false identity, the timing of the incident, these indicate calculated behavior rather than emotional crisis." The most damaging testimony came from Derek Martinez, Lily's boyfriend, who had initially provided an alibi but changed his story after being questioned by police. "Lily told me she was going to teach Maya a lesson about taking things for granted," he testified reluctantly. "She said Maya acted like she was perfect, like nothing bad ever happened to her, and it was time for that to change." Maya watched Lily's face during Derek's testimony and saw the mask of victimhood slip momentarily, revealing something harder underneath. Her sister was angry, not at herself for the choices she had made, but at Derek for telling the truth, at Maya for pressing charges, at the system for refusing to accept her carefully constructed narrative of mental health struggles and family loyalty.
During the lunch recess, Maya found herself in the courthouse cafeteria with Marcus Thompson, who had taken a personal day to attend the trial as moral support. They sat at a small table near the window, picking at sandwiches neither of them really wanted to eat. "How are you holding up?" Marcus asked, his voice carrying the gentle concern that made him such an effective respiratory therapist. "I keep waiting to feel guilty," Maya admitted. "Everyone expects me to be torn up about testifying against my sister, but mostly I just feel relieved, like I finally told the truth about something I'd been covering up for years." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes love means holding people accountable instead of protecting them from consequences. Maybe the most loving thing you could do for Lily is let her face the reality of what she's done." When court resumed for the afternoon session, Lily took the stand in her own defense. She was a compelling witness, articulate, emotional, seemingly fragile in a way that made her actions appear incomprehensible rather than calculated. She spoke about their father's death, about the pressure she felt to live up to Maya's achievements, about the depression that sometimes made her feel invisible in her own life. "I loved that car almost as much as Maya did," she testified, tears streaming down her face. "It represented stability and safety, everything I felt like I was missing in my own life. When I crashed it, I wasn't trying to hurt Maya, I was trying to hurt myself, to punish myself for being such a failure." Maya found herself wondering if any of it was true. Had Lily really been suffering to the extent she claimed, or was this another performance designed to generate sympathy and avoid accountability? After years of listening to her sister's explanations,
Maya had lost the ability to distinguish between genuine emotion and calculated manipulation. But DA Walsh's cross-examination methodically dismantled the narrative of impulsive self-harm. She presented evidence of Lily's research into the car's value, her false identity when contacting the Blackwood family, her threats to Maya after confessing. Each piece of evidence painted a picture of someone who knew exactly what she was doing and had planned carefully to avoid detection. Miss Chen, if this was truly an impulsive act of self-harm, why did you lie to your sister about the brakes failing? I was ashamed. I was afraid she would hate me if she knew the truth. But you weren't afraid she would hate you for the actual damage to her car. Your concern was specifically about her knowing it was intentional? Lily hesitated, recognizing the trap but unable to avoid it. Yes. And when you confessed the truth during the recorded phone call, you immediately tried to manipulate her into not pressing charges, didn't you? I was scared. I wasn't thinking clearly. Were you thinking clearly enough to threaten to claim she had pressured you into confessing? Maya watched the jury's faces during this exchange and saw the moment when sympathy shifted to skepticism. Lily's careful narrative of mental health crisis was colliding with evidence of calculated behavior and witness intimidation. The closing arguments crystallized the case into competing visions of justice and family loyalty. Hawthorne painted Lily as a troubled young woman who needed treatment, not imprisonment, someone whose crime grew out of mental illness rather than criminal intent. Walsh presented her as someone who had exploited family trust to commit a serious felony, then attempted to use that same family loyalty to escape consequences.
This case is about more than money, Walsh told the jury. It's about the assumption that family members can be victimized without recourse, that love can be weaponized to prevent accountability. Lily Chen destroyed something irreplaceable that belonged to her sister, then lied about it, then threatened her sister for telling the truth. These are not the actions of someone deserving of leniency. These are the actions of someone who views other people's property and emotions as tools for her own purposes. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned with guilty verdicts on all counts, felony insurance fraud, destruction of property over $400,000, and witness intimidation, Maya felt a complex mixture of relief and grief. Justice had been served, but the cost was the final destruction of any illusion that her relationship with Lily could be repaired. Judge Patricia Morrison sentenced Lily to 4 years in state prison, with the possibility of parole after 2 years contingent on completion of financial responsibility courses and psychological counseling. Miss Chen, the judge said, your actions represented a profound betrayal of family trust and the deliberate destruction of irreplaceable cultural property. While I acknowledge your mental health struggles, they do not excuse the calculated nature of your crimes or your subsequent attempts to manipulate the justice system. Maya watched Lily being led away in handcuffs, her sister's face a mask of fury and disbelief that her carefully constructed victim narrative had failed to generate the sympathy she expected. There were no final words between them, no tearful reconciliation or promises to rebuild their relationship during the prison years ahead. Outside the courthouse, Patricia Blackwood was waiting with a manila envelope and a sad smile. Maya, I wanted to give you something before you left. My father kept detailed documentation about the Honda prototype, original purchase paperwork, Honda's correspondence about the testing program, even some photographs of the car when it was new. Maya accepted the envelope with trembling hands, feeling the weight of history and loss. Mrs. Blackwood, I'm so sorry your father's car ended up being destroyed like this. My father would have been heartbroken about the destruction, but I think he would have been proud that you fought for the truth. He was an engineer. He believed in precision, accuracy, and holding people accountable for their work. What you did in that courtroom honored his memory more than any museum display could have.
That evening, Maya sat in her small apartment looking through the documents Patricia had given her. There were photographs of the Honda when it was still a prototype, surrounded by engineers in white coats who treated it like the technological marvel it was. There were internal Honda memos discussing the car's advanced features, letters between Thomas Blackwood and the company about purchasing procedures. Most remarkably, there was a handwritten note from Thomas Blackwood dated shortly before his death. This car represents the best of what we can achieve when engineering meets passion. I hope whoever drives it next understands that they're not just transporting themselves, they're carrying forward a piece of automotive history. May it serve them as faithfully as it served me. Maya pressed the note against her chest and allowed herself to cry for the first time since the accident. Not for Lily, not for their destroyed relationship, but for Thomas Blackwood's optimism and faith in the future. For 8 years of faithful service from a car that had been extraordinary in ways she'd never understood. For the simple loss of believing that family love was unconditional and safe. 6 months later, Maya used the insurance settlement to buy a modest house with a garage, understanding now that some things were too precious to leave unprotected. She kept Thomas Blackwood's documentation in a fire-safe box and sometimes took out the photographs, remembering the car that had carried her through the most difficult years of her life without ever asking for more than basic maintenance and occasional appreciation. She never visited Lily in prison, though she sent her sister's lawyer information about educational programs and counseling services available to inmates. Love, Maya had learned, sometimes meant creating distance rather than closeness, boundaries rather than bridges.
The empty garage waited for a new car, a new beginning, a chance to move forward with the hard-won wisdom that trust was not infinite and forgiveness was not the same as enabling. Maya had survived the destruction of more than just a Honda Civic. She had survived the destruction of the version of herself that prioritized family harmony over personal integrity. And in the silence of her own space, protected by walls and locks, and the clear understanding that some people could not be trusted with precious things, Maya began to heal. 2 years after Lily's sentencing, Maya received an unexpected phone call while preparing for her shift at Riverside Community Hospital. The voice on the other end was professionally warm but unfamiliar. Miss Chen, this is David Morrison from the National Automotive Heritage Foundation. I understand you once owned a 1987 Honda Civic SI prototype that was destroyed in an accident. I'm calling because we're developing an exhibit about lost automotive history, and we'd love to include your car's story. Maya set down her coffee cup, suddenly transported back to that golden afternoon when her world had shattered in the space between one heartbeat and the next. How did you hear about the car? Patricia Blackwood contacted us after reading about your sister's trial in an automotive history newsletter. She felt the car's story deserved to be preserved, even if the vehicle itself couldn't be. Morrison paused, and Maya could hear papers rustling in the background. Miss Chen, what happened to that prototype represents a significant loss to automotive history. We'd like to honor both the car and your stewardship of it. The exhibit opened 6 months later at the Peterson Automotive Museum in Los Angeles. Maya stood before a display case containing Thomas Blackwood's original documentation, photographs of the Honda prototype in its testing days, and a placard that read, "In memory of Honda Civic SI prototype number 37, owned and cherished by Maya Chen, 2015 to 2023. Destroyed by deliberate act, but not forgotten." Visitors stopped to read the story, the engineering marvel hidden in plain sight, the young nurse who had unknowingly preserved automotive history for 8 years, the family tragedy that had brought it all to an end. Maya watched a teenage girl examine the photographs with intense fascination, her mother explaining the concept of prototype vehicles and the importance of preservation. "Excuse me," the teenager said, approaching Maya with the confidence of someone raised to believe her questions mattered. "Are you Maya Chen, the one who owned this car?" Maya nodded, still surprised when strangers recognized her name from the exhibit materials. "I'm doing a project for school about how regular people become part of history without knowing it. Can I ask you what it felt like to learn your car was so special?" The question carried Maya back through years of memory. The pride she had felt in maintaining an old Honda, the security of knowing she had reliable transportation, and the gradual understanding that she'd been caring for something irreplaceable. It felt like finding out someone you loved had been secretly extraordinary all along, and then feeling responsible for protecting that legacy, even when you couldn't protect the thing itself. The teenager scribbled notes with the intensity of someone who believed in the power of stories to change lives. "My grandmother says you should never trust anyone who's cruel to old cars or stray animals. Do you think that's true?" Maya considered the question, thinking about Lily's casual destruction of something that had served faithfully for decades. "I think kindness to things that can't defend themselves reveals something important about character. Whether it's an old car or a stray animal or a person who's different from you, how you treat the vulnerable says more about who you are than how you treat people who can help you." 3 years after the trial, Maya received a letter from Lily, the first direct communication since the courthouse. The return address showed a California women's correctional facility, and Maya stared at the envelope for 20 minutes before opening it. "Maya," the letter began, "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I needed to write this whether you read it or not. I've been in therapy for 2 years now, and I'm finally starting to understand the difference between explaining my behavior and excusing."
I destroyed your car because I was angry at the life you'd built and jealous of the person you'd become. I told myself it was impulsive, that I was mentally ill, that I deserved sympathy instead of consequences. But the truth is that I planned it because I wanted to hurt you. I wanted to take away something that made you happy and secure. I know you'll probably never forgive me, and I understand why. But I wanted you to know that I finally see what I did. Not just to the car, but to you, to our family, to the trust that took years to build and seconds to destroy. I'm not asking for anything from you. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, really sorry, in a way I wasn't capable of being before. Maya read the letter 3 times, looking for signs of manipulation or performance, but finding only what sounded like genuine accountability. She folded it carefully and placed it in the file box with Thomas Blackwood's documentation. Another piece of the story, another layer of complexity in the aftermath of the destruction. She never responded to the letter, but she didn't throw it away either. Some truths deserved acknowledgement, even when forgiveness felt impossible. 5 years after the accident, Maya's life had taken on new dimensions that would have been unimaginable during her Honda Civic days. The insurance settlement had provided financial security she'd never expected, allowing her to buy a house, complete a master's degree in nursing administration, and establish a small foundation that provided reliable transportation to low-income healthcare workers. The Maya Chen Foundation for Healthcare Heroes operated out of a converted garage, buying dependable used cars and providing them to nurses, home health aides, and hospital staff who couldn't afford reliable transportation. The thing about cars is that they're not just machines. They're freedom, dignity, the ability to get to work and earn a living. When someone destroys your transportation, they're not just damaging metal and glass, they're attacking your independence. Marcus nodded, understanding the deeper meaning behind Maya's work. You're making sure other people don't lose what you lost. I'm making sure other people have what I had,
A car that shows up every day, that doesn't break down when you need it most, that carries you through the hard times without asking for anything except basic care and respect. The Foundation's first recipient was Maria Santos, a single mother studying to become a certified nursing assistant. Maya presented her with a 2010 Honda Civic. Not a prototype, not historically significant, but mechanically sound and capable of serving faithfully for years to come. "Miss Chen," Maria said, tears streaming down her face as she accepted the keys. "I don't know how to thank you for this." "Drive it well, take care of it, and it will take care of you. And someday, when you're able, help someone else who needs reliable transportation." 7 years after the trial, Maya was invited to speak at a conference on restorative justice, sharing her perspective on holding family members accountable for financial crimes. The audience was filled with law enforcement professionals, victim advocates, and people who had experienced betrayal by loved ones. The hardest thing about family crime is that society expects you to prioritize forgiveness over justice. People assume that blood relationships should override legal consequences, that love means protecting people from accountability. But real love sometimes means refusing to enable destructive behavior, even when, especially when, it's coming from someone you care about. A woman in the front row raised her hand. "Do you have any relationship with your sister now?"
Maya paused, considering how to answer honestly without oversimplifying the complexity of family trauma. "I don't have contact with my sister, and I don't know if I ever will. But I hope she's become the person she claimed to be during her trial, someone genuinely working on her mental health, taking responsibility for her actions, building the kind of life that doesn't require destroying other people's property or trust." After the conference, Maya received dozens of emails from people who had experienced similar betrayals. Children who had stolen from elderly parents, spouses who had committed financial fraud, siblings who had destroyed family heirlooms or businesses. Each story carried the particular pain of discovering that someone trusted with access to your life had used that access to cause deliberate harm. Maya responded to every email personally, offering resources for victim support services and emphasizing that choosing accountability over enabling was not a betrayal of love. It was a different expression of love, one that prioritized long-term growth over short-term comfort. 10 years after the accident, Maya stood in her garage looking at a wall covered with photographs. Pictures of cars donated by the foundation, thank you notes from recipients, updates on educational achievements and career advancement from people whose lives had been changed by access to reliable transportation. In the center of the display was the original photograph of Honda Civic SI prototype number 37, surrounded by Thomas Blackwood's documentation and a small placard that read, "In memory of faithful service, 1987-2023. Some things are too precious to take for granted." Maya's current car, a practical Toyota Camry with excellent safety ratings and a reputation for longevity, sat in the garage like a reliable friend. It wasn't historically significant or extraordinarily valuable, but it started every morning and carried her wherever she needed to go without drama or complications. She had learned to appreciate different kinds of value: the practical worth of dependable transportation, the emotional significance of helping others achieve independence, the moral importance of choosing truth over family loyalty when the two came into conflict. Mrs. Rodriguez, now in her 80s but still sharp as polished steel, often stopped by to check on Maya and offer unsolicited advice about everything from car maintenance to finding a suitable husband. "Mija," she said during one visit, "you've built something beautiful from something broken. Your grandmother would be proud." Maya thought about her grandmother's words about people who break things when they can't fix themselves and realized that the opposite was also true. Some people learned to build things when they couldn't repair what had been broken. The foundation, the advocacy work, the decision to help others instead of seeking revenge, all of it had grown from the ashes of a destroyed Honda Civic and a shattered relationship. On quiet evenings, Maya sometimes took out Thomas Blackwood's documentation and read his hopeful note about the car serving its next owner faithfully. She had honored that faith for 8 years, and now she was extending it to other people who needed what she had once needed:
a way to get to work, to build a life, to move forward despite obstacles and setbacks. The insurance settlement had been significant, but the real treasure wasn't the money. It was the understanding that some losses created space for different kinds of growth, that some endings enabled new beginnings. 15 years after the accident, Maya received a phone call that would once again reshape her understanding of family, forgiveness, and the unexpected ways the past could resurface in the present. "Maya, this is Lily." The voice was older, steadier than Maya remembered, carrying none of the performative vulnerability that had characterized their last conversations. Maya found herself gripping the phone, her body responding to her sister's voice with muscle memory of betrayal and loss. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, and I'm not calling to ask for anything. I wanted you to know that I'm being released next month, and I'm moving to Oregon to work at a nonprofit that helps formerly incarcerated women find employment and housing."
Maya realized she had been holding her breath. "How did you get my number?" "Mom gave it to me. She said you've built an amazing foundation, that you've helped hundreds of people get reliable cars for work. She's proud of you, Maya. We all are." The conversation felt surreal, like speaking to a ghost from a life she'd deliberately left behind. "Why are you calling me, Lily?" "Because I wanted to tell you something I couldn't say in that letter years ago. I've spent a lot of time thinking about what I destroyed, and it wasn't just your car. It was your ability to trust your own family, your sense of safety in the world, your belief that the people who claim to love you won't deliberately hurt you." Lily's voice cracked slightly, but she continued. "I destroyed something in you that was precious and irreplaceable, and I can never give that back." Maya found herself crying, not for the car, not for their lost relationship, but for the sister she had once believed Lily could become, the person who was finally taking full responsibility without asking for forgiveness in return. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Lily said. "I don't even think you should forgive me. But I wanted you to know that your foundation, helping people get reliable transportation so they can work and build better lives, it's the most beautiful response to destruction I've ever seen. You took the worst thing I ever did to you and turned it into something that helps other people. That's who you've always been, Maya. I was just too selfish to see it." The call ended with no promises of future contact, no attempts at reconciliation, no dramatic declarations of sisterly love, just acknowledgement of harm done and growth achieved. Two people who had once shared a bedroom and childhood memories, speaking across a chasm of years and choices and consequences. Maya sat in her kitchen for a long time after hanging up, watching the afternoon light shift across the walls of the house she had bought with insurance money from a destroyed Honda Civic. The foundation had grown beyond her wildest expectations, now operating in 6 states and providing transportation assistance to healthcare workers, teachers, and other essential employees whose jobs required reliable vehicles. The latest recipient was James Martinez, a veteran studying to become a paramedic who needed dependable transportation to reach his clinical training sites. Maya had presented him with a 2015 Honda Civic, the spiritual successor to her beloved prototype, engineered with decades of technological advancement, but maintaining the same fundamental promise of faithful service. "Miss Chen," James had said, "I know this foundation started because someone destroyed your car. I'm sorry that happened to you, but I'm grateful for what you built from it." Maya smiled, thinking about the strange alchemy of trauma transformed into purpose. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us create space for the best things we do. 20 years after the accident, Maya was invited to give the keynote address at the National Conference on Family Financial Crimes. The audience included judges, prosecutors, victim advocates, and researchers studying the complex dynamics of betrayal within families. 2 decades ago, Maya began, my sister deliberately destroyed my car and lied about it, not knowing she was destroying something worth $800,000. The financial loss was devastating, but the real damage was to my ability to trust the people closest to me.
For years, I thought the worst thing about that experience was losing something irreplaceable. I've since learned that the worst thing was almost losing myself to bitterness and isolation. She paused, scanning the faces in the audience. People who understood the particular pain of being victimized by family members, the complicated grief of loving someone who had chosen to cause deliberate harm. The insurance settlement gave me financial resources I never expected, but the real gift was the opportunity to transform destruction into creation. Every car our foundation provides to someone who needs reliable transportation is a small victory over the belief that breaking things is the only way to solve problems. Every person who gets to keep their job because they have dependable transportation is proof that building up is more powerful than tearing down. After the conference, Maya received a letter from an unexpected source, Derek Martinez, Lily's former boyfriend, who had testified against her during the trial. Dear Maya, I followed your foundation's work over the years, and I wanted to tell you something I never said during the trial. After Lily was sentenced, I spent a lot of time thinking about my role and what happened. I knew she was planning something destructive. She talked about teaching you a lesson and making sure you understood what loss felt like. I could have warned you, could have stopped her, but I didn't want to get involved in family drama.
My silence made me complicit in what happened to you. I've donated to your foundation every year since then, not because I think money can undo my cowardice, but because I want to support what you've built from the ashes of what we destroyed. You deserved better from all of us, from Lily, from me, from everyone who knew something was wrong and chose not to act. I hope the work you're doing now helps heal some of the damage we caused. Maya kept Derek's letter in the same file box with Thomas Blackwood's documentation and Lily's prison correspondence, pieces of a complex story that resisted simple narratives about good and evil, victims and perpetrators, forgiveness and accountability. 25 years after the accident, Maya stood before the largest crowd she had ever addressed, the International Conference on Restorative Justice, held in Geneva, Switzerland. Representatives from 30 countries had gathered to discuss alternatives to purely punitive justice systems, exploring how societies could balance accountability with healing. The question I'm asked most frequently, Maya told the assembled delegates, is whether I've forgiven my sister for destroying my car and lying about it. The question assumes that forgiveness is the measure of recovery, that moving forward requires letting go of anger and resentment. But I've learned that healing doesn't always look like forgiveness. She gestured to a slide showing photographs from the Foundation's latest expansion, a partnership with refugee resettlement agencies to provide transportation assistance to immigrants seeking employment in healthcare and education. Instead of forgiveness, I chose construction. Instead of reconciliation, I chose prevention. Instead of restoring my relationship with someone who had proven themselves untrustworthy, I chose to build relationships with people who needed what I could offer. Some healing happens through forgiveness, but some healing happens through purpose. The presentation concluded with a video montage of Foundation recipients, nurses, home health aides, teacher assistants, childcare workers, all people whose lives had been changed by access to reliable transportation. Their faces reflected the same determination Maya had once carried, the understanding that independence required dependable tools and the willingness to maintain them with care. After the conference, Maya received an invitation that would bring her story full circle in ways she never could have anticipated. Miss Chen, the email read, I'm writing on behalf of the Honda Motor Company Historical Archives. We're developing a comprehensive exhibit about prototype vehicles and their cultural impact, and we would like to include the story of Honda Civic Si prototype number 37. Additionally, we have a proposal that we hope you'll find meaningful. The proposal, as it turned out, was extraordinary. Honda wanted to build a functional replica of prototype number 37 using original engineering specifications and period-appropriate materials. The replica would serve as the centerpiece of the Foundation's headquarters, a symbol of restoration and the power of careful stewardship. The replica won't be worth $800,000, the Honda representative explained during their meeting, but
It will be functionally identical to the car you lost, and it will carry forward the legacy of Thomas Blackwood's work and your own dedication to preserving something valuable. Maya accepted the proposal, understanding that some gifts couldn't be measured in financial terms. The Honda replica would never replace what had been destroyed, but it would serve as a tangible reminder that some endings enabled new beginnings, that careful attention could preserve what mattered most across decades and generations. 30 years after the accident, Maya Chen stood in the garage of the Maya Chen Foundation for Healthcare Heroes, looking at the Honda Civic SI replica number 37. The car was mechanically identical to Thomas Blackwood's prototype, painted the same silver-blue color, equipped with the same manual transmission and responsive steering that had made her original Honda such a joy to drive. But this car would never be driven. It would remain in the Foundation's headquarters as a memorial to faithful service, a reminder of the extraordinary value hidden in ordinary things, and a symbol of the possibility of rebuilding what had been broken.
The foundation, now operated in 12 states, had provided transportation assistance to over 8,000 healthcare workers and had been studied by policy researchers as a model for addressing employment barriers in essential industries. Maya's story had been featured in documentaries, academic papers, and congressional testimony about the intersection of family crime and economic security. Mrs. Rodriguez, now 92, and still dispensing wisdom from her front porch, had lived to see the Foundation's growth and Maya's transformation from broken victim to purposeful advocate. "Mija," she said during one of their last conversations, "your grandmother was right about people who break things when they can't fix themselves. But she never told you what happens to people who build things when they refuse to stay broken. They become the kind of person other people remember long after they're gone." Maya thought about that observation as she prepared her final report as the Foundation's executive director. After 3 decades of growth and service, she was ready to transition leadership to younger advocates, while remaining as an advisory board member. The report concluded with a reflection that captured the essence of her journey, from destroyed car to reconstructed purpose. 30 years ago, someone I trusted deliberately destroyed something precious that belonged to me. The loss was devastating, not just financially, but emotionally and spiritually. I learned that some people will hurt you precisely because they know you love them, that family loyalty can be weaponized against family members, that trust, once broken, creates scars that never fully heal. But I also learned that destruction creates space for construction, that some endings enable new beginnings, that the choice between bitterness and purpose is one that gets made every day through small acts of decision and will. The car I lost was irreplaceable. The relationship I lost was irreparable. But the work that grew from that loss has created value that multiplies rather than diminishes, helps rather than harms, builds rather than destroys. Some people break things when they can't fix themselves. Other people build things when they refuse to stay broken. The choice between destruction and construction is the most important decision any of us makes, and we make it new every morning when we decide how to respond to whatever broke us yesterday. 8,000 healthcare workers now have reliable transportation because someone once destroyed mine. Thousands of families have stability because mine was shattered. Countless patients receive better care because nurses and aides and technicians can get to work dependably, regardless of weather or mechanical problems or economic uncertainty. That is the true value of Honda Civic SI prototype number 37. Not the $800,000 it was worth as a collector's item, but the endless multiplication of purpose that grew from its destruction. Some treasures reveal their worth only after they're broken, and some breaking makes space for building something that could never have existed otherwise. We are all stewards of things more precious than we realize. The question is not whether those things will be broken. Everything valuable gets broken eventually. The question is what we choose to build from the pieces. Maya stood before the replica Honda one final time as Foundation director, her hand resting on the hood, just as she used to do with the original.
The metal was warm from the afternoon sun streaming through the garage windows, and for a moment she could almost feel the rumble of the engine that had carried her through so many years. "Thank you," she whispered, not sure if she was speaking to Thomas Blackwood, to the car itself, or to the strange alchemy of loss that had transformed destruction into purpose. Behind her, the walls displayed photographs of thousands of recipients, nurses rushing to emergency calls, home health aides reaching elderly patients, teachers arriving safely at schools in underserved communities. Each face represented a choice: to build rather than break, to trust again despite betrayal, to believe that tomorrow could be better than yesterday. The Foundation's new director, Maria Santos, the first recipient 30 years ago, now a nurse practitioner with 2 decades of experience, approached with the keys to Maya's successor vehicle, a practical hybrid that would carry her into retirement with the same reliability she had once found in an extraordinary Honda. "Ready for your next journey?" Maria asked, her voice carrying the warmth of someone who understood that endings were often disguised as beginnings.
Maya nodded, accepting the keys and the weight of possibility they represented. She had learned that some crashes destroyed everything you thought you valued, while others cleared space for everything you never knew you needed. As she drove away from the Foundation headquarters for the last time as director, Maya caught sight of the replica Honda in her rearview mirror, gleaming silver blue in the fading light, a monument to the truth that love sometimes meant letting go, that justice sometimes required separation, and that the most precious things we build often grow from the ashes of what we've lost. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel.